Alright, hello everybody, my name is Will and this is Crazy Talk Analytics, and in this video I'd like to talk to everybody a little bit about ranges. And if you notice, I am labeling this as part 1, as this can really be part of a much larger conversation, discussion if you will, albeit one-sided, that side being mine. And I'm a little bit short on time from what I usually like to do for my videos, which probably benefits you in this case, and that I only have about 20 minutes or less. So another reason why I'm deciding to call this part 1. Now I will encourage you to take a look at chapters on this. I don't know if I'll post it without chapters. I'm going to try to post everything with chapters, but sometimes I get a little excited and I want to get it on the page on the channel sooner so people could see it, and depending on time restrictions, chapters may or may not be added at that time. So no, none of my typical, start of episode warnings or anything, because with this we're not doing a project. We're just going to go right into a topic, right into a discussion or a talk, if you will. So hold on one second. I'm gonna. All right, my throat's acting up a little bit. I don't know if the coffee's going to help that much, but we'll see how that goes. So ranges, right? It's a in my mind, one of the most important, not just a very important, but one of the most important objects in the Excel object hierarchy. And let's touch on that real quick. I'll go ahead and click around a little bit while we talk. But basically, if you're relatively new to this, or you've been using VBA for a bit, but you've just kind of been copying and pasting what you've seen, and you don't have a really good, strong understanding of what's going on with the programming language, VBA is an object-oriented programming language. So the way you're going to get the most out of it is by really manipulating, really utilizing this concept of an object, which is sort of like this definition of something, of an object in code form. We typically use classes to define objects. We give them methods and properties. Now, in the terms of, or in the cases of things like your Excel applications, etc., these objects are predefined. They're part of what would be called a object reference library. So these objects, again, let's go back to this case of Excel. These objects make up essentially the program, or the program can be divided into different objects. And how we control Excel through VBA is by controlling those individual objects. The more control or better control you have over them, the better code you can write, the more efficient you can be. So for example, let's just say the whole application itself actually is an object, and it's comprised of a lot of different pieces, different components. So what a property of an object is so basically there's two things, right? And we'll get right into ranges right quick, I promise you. But objects essentially have properties and methods. They also have things called events at times, but a property is an attribute or characteristic or something about it that's definable, like a size, shape, name, etc. Method is something that the object does. So with application, a property of the application could be its workbooks, and with that workbook, an property of that um, workbook could be a worksheet, and then your worksheet could have a property of ranges or range, and that's what we're getting down to now. So basically, if you were to look at it in a structure, you could go, and actually let me just go ahead and pop in a new worksheet here. I think I just have to click over here. So basically, a good way to look at this is we have our application, and then the application goes down to, technically it would go down to something called workbooks, which is a collection, and then within that collection you would retrieve a workbook. And there could be a whole lot of variations on this worksheet, which is again a collection, and a collection is just a collection of objects, plural if you will. And then you have your worksheet, and then you could have your range. Now there are a lot of aliases for a range. So a range can also be considered or called a cell. You could refer to a range. So we have range aliases, and basically it's a cell, it's a range. A column is a type of range. A selection. Oh, my throat is really. A selection isn't necessarily a range, but it returns a range. We also have things like our active. Uh, so let's say. Let's get rid of this one. So we say active cell is another one, and then let's just say down here that selection. So these are just a few things in terms of range aliases or ways that we can access or use a range. So basically, the cell would be your individual cell. Also, I should put in here that cells, multiple cells, are also a range as well. So if we select one cell, that's a range, and that range we would refer to that range, we'd give it an address of that cell. So in this case, it would be G9. And then over here, this is also a range as well. But this is a range in terms of having a starting and ending point, right? So a range can have just one start and end point. It would be itself, and then in this case, this range is G9 to H10. It has a start and end point, so they're different. So this is really what we'd consider a range, not just in an object sense, but in a range that it spans a collection or number of items. Um, we also have the column as being a range, and this would be range column F, and then rows can be a range as well. And when we're talking about our object hierarchy, such as the worksheet, we can access these. So basically, a range is always going to be pretty much a property of a worksheet. So it's important to understand that relationship, to understand, when you might have to specify that you're accessing a range on, just an active cell, or you're accessing a range specifically on a worksheet in particular. And that's something that we can capitalize on when we get into our Visual Basic Editor in terms of using specific worksheet modules. So I feel like I was going somewhere else and I got sidetracked a little bit. But yeah, so with ranges, it's really important to understand what a range is and then what you can do with it. So any sidetrack thoughts, hopefully they come back to me. So let's go ahead and open up our Visual Basic Editor. So I did Alt F11 there, and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to have this open on the side. So we have our worksheet here, and let me just kind of slide this over. Now I'm not going to be working with any preset, pre-configured data. Anything we do here, we're just going to kind of wing it so that you can follow along at home easier, I hope. And hopefully we can illustrate a lot of the principles well enough. So you see here that currently I have sheet 1 activated. This is sheet 1 that we're working on right now. It says sheet 1, we have the object name and then the worksheet name. So I could, for example, put in here and say range demo, changing the tab name, and then the sheet name up here, range demo, change from sheet 1 to range demo. So this is what sheet we're actively working on. And keep in mind, a range is a property of a worksheet. So if I open this module and I start typing in here, so we're just gonna now all of our code, we have two things we can work in. We can work up here in our code module where we're actually storing code related to whatever module, class module, Excel object, whatever it is that we have. And then we also have our immediate window down here, which really has no loyalty. It doesn't think of this worksheet, this module that we have at the top. It's just sort of like a general active thing. So if I were to come down here in the immediate window and I were to say the infamous debug.print and then active cell.address, and we'll get into all this real quick. So if I do this, what I'm doing is I'm accessing the address property of a range, and what that's going to do is that's going to print that row column reference. And active cell is a really nice way to reference whatever range is actively selected on the worksheet that's actively selected. So when you flip between different worksheets, you always leave a cell actively selected. It might not be the same one that you have here. So over here it's D8, and over here it's A3. So if I run active cell, it is considering the current active cell on the current active workbook. It's not going to flip through all of them. So it's telling me here it's D8, and now if I come over here to my LTA sheet and I check this out, it's going to tell me A3. So I'm getting a different result based on what worksheet I have active. But there will always be an active range. Now if I come up here, and let's just create a sub procedure, public sub, and what I'm going to do here is say public sub, let's just call this sandbox. Just for, it doesn't matter what it's called, right? I just need something to enclose my code in that I can execute it, because it has to have a home, whether it's a function, a sub procedure, or something. So now if I come up here and I say debug.print, now if I were to say active cell, I'm kind of curious how this works, because I don't think it's always going to go to the I don't think it's going to have any loyalty to the sheet that it lives on. This is something I could be wrong about, but let's find out. So this will print it down here. So again, I'm expecting a D8 over here, so I'm going to click play, and we got that. Now if I come over here, the question I have is this going to go to range demo, or is it going to stick to LTA? And I think it's going to stick to LTA. And again, that's because the active cell as an alias has sort of a different meaning. So it sure does. It goes to A3. Now, the benefit here of using a module, though, is, let's say that I want to print, let's say I put a text in here. Well, we have some stuff already in here. So let's say we have B9, right? So B9 is a range. So what I could say here is I could say debug.print, and now we're going to mix things up a little bit. Instead of relying on the active cell, we're going to tell Excel, hey, we want you to do something with a specific range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say range, and we're going to say we don't need that, B9. Now if you note, I am passing range as an argument in a text qualifier, and that's because it is a string, the argument here. So when we're passing this column row reference in this sort of alphanumeric format, this is how you do it. Almost say this is how you do it. I almost wanted to break into song. So we're going to print this, and by the way, if you omit it, range defaults to value. This is usually mostly helpful, but sometimes if you want to reference the actual range object and not the value, it can actually be a little bit annoying. We'll just leave this for right now. So it tells me range aliases. That's the text that's in that cell. Now it doesn't matter where I am. If I print this, we're gonna get that same text because it's referring to that. Now this is where it gets interesting, right? I'm gonna come over here. Now my B9 is actually down here. It's a blank cell. So if I try to run it now, it still says range alias. And if you're programming, you're like, well, hey, I don't want it to print the range demo worksheet B9. Well, that's because, remember, range is a property of a worksheet. And right now we are on sheet 1's worksheet tab. So it's inferring or implying that you want the range from that worksheet. Now we can still print the range from another worksheet. We just need to define it. We need to specify it. So in this case, I'm going to use the actual object name. So remember, VBA is object-oriented programming. So what we'll do here is I'm trying to think here. There's nothing on here. So let's just go ahead and give our code something. Let's give it something to talk about. So A3, right? So we're going to put that there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to change this from B9 to A3. And I know I'm not going to be able to play this video because of licensing licensing or copyright rules on that song. I just totally nailed, right? So we're going to say debug.print and sheet 2, and we're going to say range A3. So we're going to run this now, and we're going to get something. So we're able to access a range on another sheet by basically referencing that object, that separate definable Excel object. So I don't have a lot of time. Well, this is sort of like our introduction. So this is our primer, if you will, for continuing the conversation. And I think this one doesn't really need chapters because we're just kind of hyping it up and getting started. So I want to show you this though. There's a few things. So remember, ranges have properties and they have methods, and we're gonna explore the heck out of them in the next video. And I think I finally got something here. Unfortunately, I can't string this all into one. I'm hoping that might be a good thing for you. But I want to show the Object Explorer or Object Browser here. So remember, VBA all object-based programming language. If we click on this, we'll actually see what all these objects look like. So we can take our all library selection up here, go down to Excel, and then we could look for the range object. So a few ways to navigate. We have our search results here, and then we can also just look through our classes here. Remember, a class is sort of a definition of a range. So I'm just going to come down here a little bit, and I'm looking for this class. It's basically finding everything it's a part of, I guess. You know, but here we go, finally. It's just about to give up. And so I'm going to click on this, and we're on the range now down here. So it's selected that class. And it's telling me all the members of range. And these members, it's a member exclusive club, very exclusive club. We have activate, so activating a range, add a comment to a range. So when you think about it, you see people have cells, they have comments or notes in them. That's what we're doing here. We already took a look at address here, how we could return an address, which is a location, and then we also have our value, which we looked at briefly as well. Look at this huge list. There is so much in here. So here's value, and what it tells me is property value takes the range as a data type. Well, actually, property value, range value, data type. It's a member of Excel range. All right. Yeah, actually, so I think what this is I don't know why this is in parentheses necessarily, but typically what it'll do is it'll try to tell you how it's returning information. So here it says property text as a variant and tells you it's a variant type of data. Really, it's a text string for the most part. This is just sort of telling you some arguments that it can take. And that makes me think that right here, I think this is square brackets in there. Something I don't really use in the value property, and that might be optional arguments. So there might be something about this property that I don't know about. So we're always learning, and that's the thing. Looking at this huge list, there's so much in here that we just never are going to know all of it. And that's one of the problems with trying to learn or teach this, is you're going to know just what you need to know to do what you have to do, or have to get done what you have to get done. So just a quick comment on this, what looks to me like a chalkboard eraser, old school, like green chalkboard eraser being thrown. That's your method. And then what looks like a finger or something pointing to a drop-down list, that's your properties. So these are set things, set attributes, characteristics. They could be other objects, such as a range is a property of a worksheet. These could be values, text values. It could be something that tells you the address or the border, what's around that range, which itself is another property. So when we click on this, we're going to get that borders, basically borders returns borders, which is a read-only property, and it's a property of Excel range. But if you go to borders over here, you'll see borders itself is a class definition that has its own properties. So that's kind of how that works. So we looked at what a method looks like, and this is what a property looks like. And another thing I want to do real quick, and then I'll leave you to kind of soak this in a little bit, and then we'll try to pick up our conversation. is if we push F1, as long as your help isn't disabled, then you'll be taken to the Microsoft help page. This has all the information on ranges that you need to know, that you everything you wanted to know but were afraid to ask. So we got it, and it tells you, it gives you some overview, some examples, and then we have our range object here. These are our methods. So again, these are actions, right? We're activating ranges, we're applying names, we're clearing them, clear contents. So these are all the methods or actions that the ranges perform. If you're lucky, they'll give you examples. They'll tell you what type of value gets returned. So the object browser only does so much for us. This does a whole lot more. So these are the actual properties, formula R1, C1, etc. So when we pick up the conversation on ranges, we'll see how we can reference them not only in the alphanumeric sort of column, letter, row, number format, but also the much more useful R1C1 format, which, as we see over here, formula R1C1, that row column reference tends to lend itself a whole lot better to programming in VBA, and it'll help you to create more fluid, more understandable, easy to read, more efficient code. So we'll demonstrate some of that. We'll see the different ways to access those range items, to iterate over them, to set their values, and to do really neat things with them. What really neat things are we going to do? I gotta think about it for a bit, and I'll get back to you. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead, wrap this up. I'm not going to worry so much about chapters, as this is really sort of just an introduction. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any specific questions. If there's anything you want specifically discussed, feel free to drop it in the comment. And as always, thank you for watching.